This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, Cleveland's urban alternative. Today I have the honor of interviewing an author about a great life that he is living. The title of the book is A Life in the Sunshine, and it was written by J. Everett Prewitt. He graduated from Glenville High School in Cleveland, Ohio, received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Administration from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and earned a Master of Science degree in Urban Studies from Cleveland State University. He's a Vietnam veteran and a former Army officer. As an entrepreneur, he's been president of the Northland Research Company Northland Research Corporation since 1982. The firm provides real estate appraisals and consulting services. He's received numerous honors and recognitions for his professional contributions and community service, including the Realtor of the Year Award from the Cleveland Area Board of Realtors, the Distinguished Alumni Award from Cleveland State University, the Distinguished Alumni Citation from Lincoln University, and the Award for Civic Service from the Citizens League of Greater Cleveland. So much more that I could say about him, but if you want to know more, it's in the book. It's called A Life in the Sunshine. Welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson, Mr. J. Everett Prewitt. Mr. Prewitt, how are you today?
I'm good, Vince. Thank you.
Man, I only read a portion of your bio, but your book is your bio. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I was most appreciative of is the fact that you revealed so much about your family and about your ancestors. And you started the book with a scene in which you were around and in the presence of the male figures in your family. And it was just so impressive to see that union of black men and what it meant to you. Can you talk about the significance of that moment in your life?
Oh, man. Look, I've got to tell you, I was blessed with my father, my uncles, all strong men. Not one weak one in the group. They all became either entrepreneurs. One was a professor at West Virginia State. But I think what impressed me most is when talked, especially at family reunions, never heard them complain. Never talked about the white man holding them down or anything. Always talked about positive things, about where they were going from here and what they were going to do to, be better. Just a positive vibe, a positive atmosphere. And I told somebody one time, I said, I had read where trauma can be, can go from generation to generation, can come down from generation to generation. But, I said positivity can also take that same path. And that's what I was blessed with. I was blessed with that positivity, that environment.
Yes. Well, you mentioned in the course of your book, and I'm happy to tell everybody that I read your book in one day. It's a thick book, but it's so engaging that you just can't put it down because you're an author and you're a master storyteller, and the stories that you told are filled with wisdom and gems and so forth. So, I mean, I apologize for being so effusive, but I'm still, I'm still relishing, the fact that I read so much of it and it just resonated in so many ways. But you said in your book that, when you had family gatherings, and I think you were talking about having family reunions, that people would have an opportunity to talk about their accomplishments. And you are from a very accomplished family, and including your sister and a few of the folks that I remember. I remember the dude Frankie, because Frankie had a tremendous impact on your life.
Yes.
Your sister and one other character, or one other person. He wasn't a character; he was a person. But your uncle Victor.
Yes. Yeah.
He
My
was
man.
he was one of the coolest people on the planet, and I could see why you had so much love for him. The fact that he wrote you letters. Back in the day, you didn't pick up the phone. You sent somebody a letter. That's why that song "Hey, Mr. Postman" resonated so much with folks.
That's true. That's true.
Yes. So
Yeah, one thing I got from Uncle Victor is that, we talk about leading double lives.
Mm-hmm.
That man, he did both to the hilt.
Yes. And then you being in San Francisco and being in clubs and not knowing who you were kicking it with.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm just telling folks, y'all need to pick up this book. You can go to, is it EverettPrewitt.com?
ePrewitt.com.
ePrewitt.com. Go to ePrewitt.com and you can, get a hold of that book and other books that you have written. One thing that I appreciated about the book, and, I haven't read your fictional books, but this autobiography is so nuanced, and it just impressed me the extent to which you remember things that happened to you in your childhood. You grew up in Glenville, and you went to Glenville High School. You went to Doane Elementary, and I believe that I live on a property that is the former site of Doane Elementary, because I live on Clairdone.
Okay, yeah.
So as I was reading the book, I was thinking, we have a connection. The school is gone, but the memories are still there. Can you
Absolutely.
Can you talk about the importance and the significance of growing up in Glenville?
Well, Glenville, and I always said that if I had to relive my life and choose a neighborhood, I would choose Glenville. It was like a village. People knew each other. We had our teachers, our doctors, our police. Most lived in the area. It was a time when your neighbors would chastise you, and your parents would thank them for it. You got into some kind of trouble. Everybody knew it. The front porch was like the communication center for the area. People talked over fences, over across porches. It was just a unity there that allowed us a safe place to live, but also a place where we learned how to be adults. As we watched our parents and we watched our neighbors. And the other thing about it was we had everybody in the neighborhood. We had the rich, the poor. We had the middle class, which was the primary, group of people. But they all impressed upon you, going to work. I didn't see any homeless. I'm sure there was some. I had a couple of friends that worked for temporarily, but it was just a thriving community. Took pride in their houses, took pride in their lawns. It was just one of those very positive experiences for us growing up.
Mm. You also mentioned in the book at one point an opinion about integration, and what I took away from it was that you didn't really feel that it was really in our best interest.
Right. No. One of the things that our area also gave us is that we were grounded in our understanding of who we are, okay, because we had time to grow, and we had time to learn about ourselves, take pride in ourselves. A lot of times when you're in a majority community or environment, a lot of that, your effort is trying to fit in, to impress. We didn't have to do that. We had our little cliques, we had our little gangs and so forth, but Glenville gave you time to grow, to learn who you are, be proud of being a Black person, So when I moved to Chesterfield, I took that with me, right? And so going from a 95% Black elementary school to a 95% white elementary school didn't faze me. I just looked at them as different kind of people, not like us, but, a different type of people. And I had no problem moving through that area of my life because I had already been grounded. I already knew who I was. And
Yes.
I took that with me wherever I went.
You know something, Everett, it was just apparent to me how much of an impact your growing up had on the rest of your life. I mean, I looked at that photograph of you as a young person towards the end of your book, and I saw so much of the elder in that young person's image. It was an amazing thing, the fact that you determined that you were going to be a leader and not going to be a follower.
Yes.
The fact that,
Yes.
that you and your mother recognized that you had power in your hands, but she wasn't going to let you use them in a boxing ring.
I could have been a contender.
You could have been a contender, but she in her wisdom didn't want you to end up like Muhammad Ali or anyone
Right.
else who suffered from concussions and the trauma of having punches delivered to their skull on so many different occasions. But, one thing that I noticed about your life was that your hands were a very valuable aspect of you. Between the you that was fighting folks and the you that was cleaning up on the pool tables, your hands were, and then you as a writer, taking a typing class and typing 50 words per minute, your hands were a very essential part of J. Everett Prewitt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I when I look back, my mother was a visionary, she did and said so many things that just kind of kept me on the right path, and even though I was upset because I really, really wanted to box, that was just one of the things I just felt I was good at, and which kind of, it came out later in terms of pugil stick fighting and so forth and so on. But the thing about it is that she's looking at me and she's saying, here's your path. Here's what you're going to do. And, I didn't agree with all of it. I didn't like taking piano lessons, but then I became first French horn. So she just embedded things in me that, just kind of kept me on that path and emerged as I grew. But I got to tell you, my father, who was my man, was equally influential. He was more quiet, let my mother do a lot of the talking, but I just watched how he carried himself, and that was a lesson within itself, how he treated people, how people treated him, how he conducted his business. Those are all the things I learned from him. So I was blessed twice.
Yes. You also mentioned that your father was not a hugger. He was a man of few words, but he wasn't
Right.
someone that was going to just give you a bear hug and I think about in relation to my father, because my father was exactly the opposite.
Okay.
But my father was someone who grew up not knowing his father. And as I read about the men in your family, one thing that you said about them was that they were solution oriented. They weren't people who would cry and complain about what was going on. They were people who took things into their own hands. And I think that was part of what resonated with you, because when you saw things that weren't right, you would walk towards them and not away from them.
Yes, yes, yes. I got in trouble sometimes, because I challenged. The system. I challenged, in the Army. I was challenging all the time, because one thing I wanted my people to be okay, and I was okay, but I'm not completely okay unless everybody around me is okay. And so I always spoke out on that.
Yes. Some of the experiences that you had in your military career, I will be transparent with folk and let folks know that we've had interviews before. I had you as a guest on the television show, but
Yes.
when I had you as that guest, I mean, I knew that you had done some significant things, but I was not aware to the extent that you had after having read your book and seeing all the things that you were involved in. One thing that was really of particular interest to me was the time that you spent on the other side of the world and how you were in this place that was kind of like a Miami Beach resort. And then at one point, the gunfire started, and then you guys had to go from the vacation experience to the military war experience. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah. Yeah, I started out in Coochie. So Coochie was always under siege. I mean, we were getting mortar attacks and so forth and so on. So, it was a place that was always in some type of turmoil. Then I get transferred to Cameron Bay, and the first thing I see are people walking around in sandals and beach towels on their on their shoulders, and I'm like, it took me a little while to acclimate, man. I'm saying, man, what is this? And so, that was cool. I met some cool people. Everything was quiet and peaceful, and then one day we got attacked, and your mind is at rest. So you're not prepared for this because nothing foretold that you were going to have to go back into combat. And so when it happened, I just kind of like, man, I mean, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, I'm like, but at the same time, that was a problem that had to be solved. So I had been given an AK-47. I took it, crawled out on the sand and looked around me and went where the fight was. And, it just took a mental shift that you had to go into combat mode when you were so used to just being in vacation mode,
Yes. Well, I read through that section, and I also read into it the fact that you had the awareness of how to advocate for your soldiers, understanding that they had to deal with the racism that was prevalent back then. That racism that prevented you from moving forward in other situations that you assessed, and you would ask the question, basically, what is the career path here? And if it wasn't something that would lead you to becoming a general or becoming a president or whatever, if there was no ascension path, then it wasn't for you. So I was particularly touched by the passage where you were talking about this person that you gave grace to and agreed to move things forward after it was advantageous to him.
Yeah, you talking about the guy that was being court-martialed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, again, there was some inequality there. Just process paperwork for somebody that got a lesser sentence. And here comes his brother. They want to go whole hog on him. So I just said, look, I have it in my power to correct the situation. And so I did it. I let them go. I said, just take off. I'll lose the paperwork and bless you.
Yes.
And so, but that's been my life, man. You never really feel satisfied, even though you might live this, life that, you feel good about, but you never really feel satisfied until you see people around you doing the same thing.
Yes.
And anytime you can, impact on that, anytime that you can make somebody else's life better, then you feel better,
Yes. Well, it was kind of an anomaly that you even had to serve in the war, because the way you had things set up, you would have a classification that would prevent you, but then you ended up going anyway. But I want to rewind a little bit because I really enjoyed the passage about how you got tricked into going to Lincoln University. You had been at Ohio University. And your mother told you about another school. I'll let you tell the story, how you ended up at Lincoln University.
Yeah, well, first of all, I punched out at OU. I was having too much fun. I was making a lot of money on the pool table. I had friends, female friends. And so, so when I punched out, I said, okay, let's go back and get a job and work and maybe take some night courses or whatever. My mother said, I found out about this school in Pennsylvania, and I want you to attend it. Well, they're paying the bill, so I said, okay. So I looked it up myself, and I'm looking at it, and I say, Mom, this is all male school. She said, yeah, but I hear that there's a female school across the highway or the road. And I said, okay. So first thing I do when I get off the bus is I look across the road to a cornfield. So I said, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna make the best of this situation.
Right, but you went to a historically black college. The same one that Kwame Nkrumah and some other quite impressive folks went to. I think Gil Scott Heron was also a student, and I think you actually quoted him in your book.
Yes. Yeah, we had some really prominent people that went through Lincoln University, even some in my classes, because one of my good friends became a millionaire. One assistant prosecutor. These guys. And almost to a person, they were studious, disciplined. It was just a great environment, to get down and study and learn. And I would recommend an HBCU to anybody.
Yes. Well, it's so ironic that while we have this conversation, that the federal government and this administration is making moves to make HBCUs not black anymore. To say that if you show preferential treatment to a black student, then you've done something, something wrong, because you showed this student some grace or some favor, and so now they want to make the HBCUs white. It's just crazy.
Well, this too will pass.
Yes, indeed. And but I think, to get to your point about integration, there have been places and spaces in this country where we have existed and we've done well because we were in our own situation where we were self-sufficient and responsible for everything. I mean, Greenwood, Oklahoma is one of the ones that folks know about, but there were so many others that we enjoyed our success. So to see that that's happening, but also just to get to the importance of history, you were able to tie your history to specific nations in Africa. And how many of us do that? We always end up with the plantation owner, and that's where our journey stops. So,
man, look, one of the things I said that, we talk about reparations, the minimum that we should receive is to be able to connect to our motherland, to the tribe that we came from. That was so eye-opening to me, because then I started looking at, I was really curious about the Crew tribe and the Mendez tribes, and it once you make that connection, that overrides that short period of time that we were enslaved and abused and so forth and so on, because that's a whole other life, okay? And it's everybody should do that. Everybody should, there's different types of ancestral research, that certain organizations do for you. But the one that I went to, it was I can't remember, but it was the African. I can't remember.
23andMe?
No. But anyway, they match your DNA to the tribes over there. I'm not interested. My daughter asked me. She said, "Well, Dad, aren't you interested in our European ancestors?" I said, "You mean what? You mean the rapists?" I mean, there was no love back there. So no, I'm not interested in that. I don't know if I got 5% Italian or 10% Swedish and so forth. That's not my history. That's not my ancestry. My ancestry is in Africa.
Right. Well,
my little
everyone's
granddaughter said, I agree with Granddad.
everyone's ancestry is African, because the Europeans
Yes.
came out of us. So, they need to
Right.
wake up to that as well. But what they've done is they've retold the story, as you recounted in your book, about the story of the hunter and the lion.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
always going to glorify the hunter until the lion tells his side of the story. So
Exactly.
what they've
Exactly.
done is they've confined our existence to a 400-year period of enslavement.
Right. Right.
And we were so much of who and what we were before that happened. And I think the overriding thing is that we have to remember who we were, but also remember who we are,
Absolutely.
And that's why this book as a historical document is so important, as I said at the top, because you paid homage to so many of your ancestors and folks who are still alive, and it was just revelatory. And I just think that, it's something that we should do more of. But I also appreciate the fact that you were able to make that cross-cultural connection. There is a group of folks in this country who push back on the whole notion that the enslavement even occurred, because they're grounded in their indigenous ancestry, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Yes. I
know,
thought you were going to say it was the Europeans that did it, but no, that's fine. Okay, but because we're so much more than history portrays us to be. So much more.
yes. There was a very telling point in the book when you encountered someone who said something to you about your father. And the implication of the statement was that, well, your father was not as successful as he could have been. But I just thought about that Chrysler New Yorker. Not everybody had to drive a Cadillac or wanted to. Talk about your father and what he did, what he accomplished, and the success that he accomplished in spite of the fact that someone would say something as derogatory as they said to you that day.
Well, a lot of people judge other people by the external. So, if you see somebody driving a Cadillac and they got furs on, and diamond rings and so forth, you automatically assume that that's successful. That's success. But success is a lot more than that. It's the internal that really determines who's successful or not. And that internal is like how you conduct yourself, how you treat other people. And he was always successful as a person that people looked up to. He mentored maybe about 1,000 people, okay, and maybe more. I don't know, during his real estate career. He was community oriented, and he was also conservative in terms of how he conducted his life. He didn't. He wouldn't. Matter of fact, I bought a Lexus, my first Lexus, and so I was driving him to the doctor or something like that. The first time he'd ever been in it, and he says, "Everett, this is not a bad car." And I said, "So what do you think, Dad? Would you no?" and so we lived on Olivet. We lived on Thornwood. And not big houses, but enough to take care of me and my sister and my mother. We stayed in the Glenville area. Had no interest in moving to the suburbs. I don't remember him wearing any diamond rings. He wore a wedding ring. They didn't have any fur coats. My mother might have had one. Yeah, she did. But he didn't. And he was satisfied with that. He wasn't competing with anybody in terms of how he looked. He had his suits and his ties and his white shirts, and he was cool with that. But they weren't designer. They weren't mohair or whatever, But he was just that kind of person. And he was successful in terms of, like, a lot of those weren't. They burned out. They faded out. Okay, somebody had to leave at nighttime because they were taking other people's money. I know one broker even had a plane, and then the next thing I hear, he's in Los Angeles on the street, trying to get enough money to live the next day. So what's that, the Phoenix? Where you get too close to the sun and you burn out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these guys did the same thing, But here's my father just steadily progressing, doing his thing, taking care of us, providing us with the knowledge to move on, providing others with, his expertise. And he was just cool like that.
Yes. And the impact that he had on the family, you would be at those family gatherings and everybody would be talking about their accomplishments. And he knew somehow that he had something to do with their success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, of course, they called him Moses because he was the first to come to Cleveland. But what's so interesting is that everybody else came with him, except for my one uncle. There's only one uncle that didn't, but he became a professor. But we all stayed together. And that was telling, too, because we were so close that it was almost inevitable that if the head, the oldest of the clan moved, that everybody else was going to come with him. And we stayed together. I think we had a Christmas dinner starting in the 40s, okay, maybe even earlier than that. It's been about 90 years, but every year we would get together. My cousins and I, we still do that. It was a tradition. And when we get together, a lot of times, that's what we do. We talk about our successes. We have our young people talk about their successes, so they can see that there's still this positivity that was passed down is still in effect.
Yes, there was a point in which your father and you had kind of a divergence, and it revolved around computers.
Right. Yeah, but that's the conservative part of him again, thinking that computers were a fad, but I can still do my work without one. I'm looking forward, but again, we didn't argue about it. I just said, Dad, I want to do something a little different. And so after 10 years of being together, I went to Shaker Square, got a computer, got a secretary that could type. That was one of the other issues we had. And it was just an area where the address just kind of gave you a different flow.
Yeah,
Okay,
because you were
so
down on Cedar and
right,
you decided another neighborhood might be a better fit.
yeah, and so, but we parted amicably because he became vice president of my firm. I stayed vice president of his firm. I bought him his first computer, and I taught him how to use it, and he was like, "Oh, okay, all right, I see." But uh, a great experience working with my father. Was a great experience.
Yes. Well, it's just, again, it's just so important to know that those types of relationships exist. Because when you look at the landscape today, it's this continuing narrative of single mothers raising their children without the presence of fathers. Like you, I've had the benefit of a father who was a very integral part of my life and a very integral part of who I am as a person. And I just think that it's so important to uplift and just give praise to fathers who choose to be fathers and say that this is not necessarily the rule.
Right.
There are a lot of men who are involved in their families and their children's lives, and I don't really think that they get the credit that they deserve. We give so much attention to the plight of the Black woman.
Yes, absolutely. But another part of that too is those of us that have had some success, that have experienced some success, we need to pass that on. I mentored for 40 years. And a lot of times, some of these young people that didn't have a father in their home, I'm the first person they met that was successful outside of selling drugs or, robbing people. So they need to be exposed to that. And I think that I made an impression on those kind of people because those kids, because I was a lot of times the first person that they met. And having grown up in an area like Glenville where I had thugs as friends, I had acquaintances that, had robbed people. I was able to connect with them because I had already been there. I wasn't that person, but I knew people like that. And I knew a lot of times that what they did was because of the lack of guidance, of being able to see their future in a positive way. And so we've got to do better in terms of, messaging these young brothers and sisters that may not have the benefit of having both parents, but provide them with the benefit of being exposed to those that have had some success in their life.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned in the book a situation where you were a substitute teacher.
Yes.
And there were 3 boys in that classroom that you just knew right away that these were the troublemakers. And you held them after school. The principal walks by the classroom because the door is open, and he sees you in there with those young men. And then what happened as a result of that is that those young men would hang out with you after school every day.
Yes, every day. I mean, I would get ready to go home, but they would stay. And so we would converse, man. And I tell you, I really connected with them because, they listen. They listen. And one of the first things I told them was like, I grew up with boys like you. So nothing you can do that, would surprise me. And that's how I picked them out. I'm looking around the room. I knew automatically who the disruptors were.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we bonded. And when I came back to that school after I had left to teach somewhere else, when I came back after class, not only the 3 boys, but the rest of my 6th grade class came out to say hello. But you know what the other part of that was? There weren't but 2 men in that school, not two male teachers in that
Right.
school.
Uh-huh.
And so, that's another issue. Um, we need more males in the school system, you know.
Right, right. Because most of our children are being taught by white women. And this is no disrespect to
Yes.
white women, but, that's what it was. And I'm just thinking about, the teachers in your family. I'm thinking about the education that you got at Glenville High School
Mm-hmm.
and schools in that neighborhood, because you had teachers who didn't have the handcuffs that teachers have now.
Oh man, look, when I heard that, like my friend Don Hill got in a fight with some kids. They jumped him after school, and he beat him into the ground, and they fired him. I mean, what kind of message is that to the other kids? Okay, that I can do what I want to, and I'm not going to have there's no consequences. We've gone too far the other way. I remember when I was at Patrick Henry, George Mills got in a fight with some boys, beat them up, and some other male teachers rushed out and jumped these guys. you know? and the lesson was, don't mess with these teachers back then, because they would whoop your butt.
Right. Well, yeah, I
And,
mean, yeah.
I'm not declaring war like that, but at least you should be able to protect yourself, and you should be able to stop fights.
Right. Well, things have changed so much, and I think the whole reason behind it is because they want to be able to send people to jail, to prison.
Yes,
That's the whole intention of the system, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And they start
yes,
early. They start when these children are in preschools, identifying them and just making the way for them to enter a prison somewhere and be taken advantage of in terms of free labor and all of that. But yeah, I think the education that you received in Glenville is very much different from the one that we get now. And I think about what you wrote about Paul Hill in East End Neighborhood House and Rites of Passage. And it's ironic because I just interviewed Mr. Hill just a few weeks ago, and we talked about Rites of Passage, its presence in the Cleveland school system, and how it got excused, the success of the program, and how vital it would be to have something like that today. Because, when we talk about Rites of Passage, it gives young people a window into their purpose and their responsibility and the respect for elders, which seems to be so absent today.
absolutely, absolutely. I chaired East End for, I don't know, a long time. And I was so impressed with it. I went through the rite of passage as an adult. And so looking back at that, yes, that should be incorporated in the school system, period. That should be part of the curriculum.
Yes. And you're right. It should be, we also talked about the fact that you had all this acreage, Camp Mueller,
Yes, yes,
and now it's gone.
yes,
And
yes.
we just let it go without a fight, without a whimper, without any outcry. We just let it go. And it was something that was so meaningful and so significant in the lives of young people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. I want to shift gears and talk about the importance of doors that you opened as a real estate appraiser and somebody who was involved in the real estate game. It seems as though your father was a trailblazer, and then you took up the mantle from him. Can you talk a little bit about how important it was for you to travel that path and some of the successes you were able to enjoy as a result of that?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I once I obtained my credentials, I went into the teaching of appraising. And I was one of the things I'm most proud about was that I was able to allow or be able to teach enough of these um, appraisers or apprentices the appraisal business that they were able to get their license. But on another topic, when I became president of the Cleveland Area Board of Realtors, the other thing that I'm really proud of is that, we had a listing service that, prior to what we call the North Ohio multiple listing service, all the big brokers had their own listing services. And so they were able to deny access to outsiders on a whim, and especially to black brokers. So we were pretty much relegated to selling properties in our segregated neighborhoods. Even I remember Isaac Hagen's when he tried to open up a brokerage on Taylor Road. The place was bombed back in the day, But what we did when we created what we called normals, and I convinced all these big white brokers to join normals because it would just be better for their businesses, and they agreed. What it also did was anybody that now is a member of normals has access to all the listings. And so all the black brokers now had open access to all these properties in the suburbs. And it just opened the doors a lot more for them. And so I was proud that we were able to do that while I was president of the Cleveland Area Board of Realtors.
Yes. It's amazing what happens when you just stick to your conviction. And understand the power that you have as an individual and how it connects with other people. And so, again, looking at the successes that you experienced and the successes that your family experienced, it was because you just had this will to succeed. So many of us just throw our hands up and say, it's all messed up out there, nothing we can do. And we just sit on the sidelines and watch other people. But, when people take it upon themselves to deal with the issues that are involved in their lives, and that's exactly when you see change. So, again, kudos to you for opening up that door to opportunity for other folks who are in the same business. I want to talk to you, Mr. Prewitt, about your love life. You were married twice. And
yes,
towards the end of your book, you talk about how peaceful it is to be in peace. And it resonates so well. I heard someone say, and this is, because we have social media and all this, but the person was saying, and maybe it was stoicism, I don't know, but he said, never invite someone to live with you, because when you invite someone to live with you, then your peace is gone. But you tell a great story about Carolyn and a confrontation that happened between you and her father, and how he kind of knew who you were, and I guess he approved of who you were because you ended up marrying his daughter.
Right.
Talk to us about that.
Well, so I'm hustling pool, and the rack man, Golly, would always give me money to play different people. And so he pointed to this guy, he said, play that older guy over there. And I played him. He beat my ass. And so, I'm upset because I had a date that night. And so I'm calling him all kind of names, and we need to give me your telephone number because we're going to play again, blase, blase. Go to my date, open the door. It's the same guy, Joe Hill. He looks at me, he just smiles. And, I'm like 2'3" at that time. And he lets me in. But me and Joe got along. Joe was a street guy. In other words, he was out there. He wasn't doing anything illegal that I know of, but, he worked at different places doing, waitering and whatever. But he was a cool dude. We even after I divorced Carolyn, we remained friends. He called me his son-in-law. We had been divorced about 2 or 3 years, and he heard I was somewhere. He said, "Where's my son-in-law?" But we had that kind of relationship, and just a real cool dude. I was so glad to have met him, whether I had married Carolyn or not. But it was, as a matter of fact, even when she would have a male friend over, he wouldn't even talk to him. He would talk to me. I remember my daughter had a birthday party. He didn't talk to the guy. He talked to me.
Yes.
And so, but I actually, that was the same situation with a couple of ladies I dated. When I met their fathers, me and the fathers got along fine. But this whole thing about peace, I think, my mother used to tell people that, I would sit out on the porch by myself and just, look up at the stars, that I like to be alone. And I guess that kind of impacted on my relationship sometimes, because I did. And then when I came back from the Army and promised myself that the one thing I was going to be in my life was peaceful. Okay. And so that kind of impacted some of my relationships, because, sometimes I just want to peel away and be by myself and just enjoy, the solitude. And even more after I came out the Army. So, I can't blame any of my, wives or my dates, my relationships, because I know a lot of times I was like that. I'm not running the streets or anything like that. Just, wanted that solitude. And so I explained to one lady, and we've been dating for quite a while now, and, she had talked about being married. I said, "Look, this is the best it's going to be right here." Okay. Right. And I don't think you want to disturb, the vibes that we've created, among each other up to this point, because I don't think it would be the same if we got married.
Yeah. And at a certain point, with all due respect, I mean, what's the point? You have a relationship. You don't need a contract to exist in the space that you exist. And the other thing is that what we're learning about marriage is that marriage really ain't for men, it's for women. Which is not to demean the institution of marriage, because it's a beautiful thing, especially when you're with the right person. But marriage, as we practice it in America, I don't know. I think that's probably why I'm not married today. Mr. Prewitt, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. There is so much that we weren't able to talk about today because we only have 54 minutes and 30 seconds. But I want to encourage everybody who is listening to this podcast today, get A Life in the Sunshine by J. Everett Prewitt. It is a magnificent read. I'm telling you, I picked it up. I didn't want to put it down. I read the whole book in one day. And just a few moments this morning, when I got up and was determined to finish the book before I had this interview, I enjoyed it immensely, and I commend you for writing it as a tribute to your family. But I can also see the value in the fiction that you've written, and I look forward to reading your other books. Thank you for joining me on Open Door.
Thank you for having me, Vince.
I'm telling you, get the book, eprewitt.com. You can get it there. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon too, but go to eprewitt.com and bless this brother with the proceeds from this book, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed. I would like to remind our listeners that we are on 95.9 FM WOVU. We are on iHeartRadio. And you can also listen to this podcast after the fact on my YouTube channel. So just go to Vince Robinson on YouTube, and you can see this and other podcasts that I've done on this show and other shows, television shows, performances that we've done. You can see a lot on that YouTube channel. And once you get there, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can find out when we post more content such as this. As always, I would like to encourage you, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.